Hey, I'm Culprate, and today I'm at DBS Music in Bristol. I'm going to do a guest lecture going through one of my tracks, which is untitled as of yet. So yeah, today I thought I'd just go through a track. It is a real work in progress, not finished. I apologise for the offensive mix. But yeah, it's I'm mainly going to look at the sound design, use of sounds, etc. So, ironically, it's called Jungle, but it's not a jungle tune. But yeah, I'll start from the top, work my way down. If you have any questions about what I'm actually talking about, just shout them out. I don't mind. Don't feel like you're interrupting. And I will try and be as detailed as possible. So yeah, unfortunately, the file with all of the sound design for the drums anyway, it doesn't open anymore. So all I've got is stems. But you know, they're just drums. There's nothing really special going on there. What I've really done is all in the bass really, which is many things layered up. In fact, I'm going to open up. I'm going to include the MIDI stuff for the bass because it's a lot more in depth. Reese's. Should have done this a minute ago, really, but you know. Right. Hopefully, it will still play. Okay, right, that's all right. Okay, so I'll leave that for the time being and just go into a description of that later. So, in here, we've got, in fact, I'll play it first, just so you know where we are. etc. You know, but yeah, it's kind of a roller basically, and it relies on a single sort of bass noise with peripherals. So the main bass sound is literally just a Reese, really, that I've layered with white noise, modulated white noise, and I'll come to that later. But how I came to that is, let's go into this folder here. And there are many layers. The main sound is essentially this. My bad. And that is, yeah, just a looped bit of noise. Hang on, let me see if I can find this in a browser. Okay, so. That's what it is. It's just like a distorted sine wave sort of Reese. I'll turn this up so you can hear it a little better. So that's what I started with essentially, and I don't have the MIDI for that anymore, but I can tell you how that was made. It's literally a sine wave with a third harmonic, which is an octave and a fifth up from the root, distorted to hell, like oversaturated beyond the point where it's necessary. And then I got white noise and put a modulation source on there to the exact frequency of the root note. So say I'm in D sharp here, so that's what, 38 hertz or something like that. It might have been an octave up that I used for the white noise just to make it a little more transparent. But yeah, that's how I get that sort of sound. It's a distorted sine wave with modulated white noise on top. If you just have the distorted sine wave, it's all good, and you probably need to boost loads of high end and stuff, but I try and avoid excessive EQing where I can, basically, because it just creates all sorts of problems. So yeah, the white noise as well is a flat sheet of noise. You know, it's like it's there for you to mold as you wish, not as you have to make it sound good. So yeah, it's pretty basic. And after that, I probably would have saturated it again. And I'm pretty sure with this sound, I did like a makeshift notch. So I would have put 2 filters in parallel, one of them being a low pass of, say, I don't know, 100 hertz, 150, something like that, whatever sounds good, and one at like 1K, which you can move. Yeah, that one's in parallel. So you've always got your fat low end and you've got your high pass moving up and down. So essentially what you're removing there is everything from like 300 to 800 hertz, which is just honky mud anyway, you know, so you don't need that in a bass like this. And yeah, and then just bounced it out, and that's essentially what you get. As you can see, there is an excessive amount of processing on here. Still a lot of parallel stuff. I'm a big fan of parallel stuff. It's parallel EQing as well, which isn't a very standard practice, especially with a non-linear phase EQ. But I just find that sometimes, like, the phase points that are created actually help with the sound, you know, because yeah, this sort of sound suits being a bit phasey sometimes, you know. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So it's just about picking your moments and just trying it out, really. So yeah, on that sound in particular, there's. You can see what that's doing, right? It's just boosting the mid-range, because I've got the white noise printed in. That was kind of destructive in a way, because then I don't have control over the amount of tops or the amount of sizzle. So I then have to do like multi-band expansion. In fact, I think that might be upwards compression. No, it's upwards expansion. So yeah, had to do that just to bring out that grunt in the middle, basically. And then we've got the parallel EQ, which is pretty self-explanatory. This, which, oh, okay, that's just low pass just for the end bits, just so you get the sub only. I tried just to put a sine wave in there, but it had literally no texture. So yeah, I wanted to maintain the texture that it had throughout. So that's why I did that. And then, is this the same thing I opened up a minute ago? No, it's not. Again, more parallel EQ. Very strange setup there. I don't know why I didn't just use that one, but hey, you know, that's what it is. And again, like, whatever works, you know, because like you might have said, a lot of people might say, oh, don't put stuff in EQs in parallel unless they're linear phase, but you know, if it works. And plus, I've cut most of that area out anyway in like pre-production or whatever in the sound design stage. So the phase issue, there won't be many phase issues in that area anyway, because there's not much information. And yeah, I assume this is just taking out some mud. Oh, right, okay, no, that's probably, yeah, that's a snare sidechain. So every time the snare hits, that little bit comes down just to counteract any masking that might be happening. Because with a bass like this, you need the sort of the muddy 200 hertz area, otherwise it just sounds thin. So, you know, just to have it come out when the snare's there is ideal, really. But again, whatever works for you, you can just EQ that out if you want, just automate the EQ, you know, it's the same thing. But obviously I've got that in linear phase, so it doesn't mess with it at all. And then I've got this monoing everything below like 700 hertz, essentially, on a 60 dB per octave, so it's really mellow, basically. It's not just cutting off everything, it's like a nice, gentle slope. I think I can show you the difference with and without. Oh, I've probably got another one on there somewhere else. Yeah, I've probably got another one somewhere else, but yeah, basically just focuses your low end, basically. And I do often have many of these along the chain because I'll do it at first in the sound design stage, and then after that I might add a reverb, which then spreads your sub bass. And I don't like wide sub bass generally, because it just, like I said, it just makes it lose focus to me. I like it when it's straight down the middle and you know where it's coming from. And yeah, it makes it sound more solid, even though there's less of it. Like, yeah, just more focused. And yeah, I think this is a free plugin as well, so definitely get hold of this if you can. It's really useful. And then yeah, just some very gentle EQ to boost a bit of the mid-range, because there's no real low end to speak of in this sound. So just the mid-range, like the sort of the bark of it, and then just to take down the high information. Because sometimes I find that people mostly spread their tops, but then you can go too far with that, I think, and you start to get a disconnect between the sound itself and the fizz around the sides, and yeah, it gets a bit distracting, especially when you're listening on headphones. So yeah, that was the case with this. That's why I did that. And then literally just this saturator on the end as a kind of limiter. But it adds colour, so it kind of degrades the high end in a sort of way, which is what I wanted for this, because there's a lot of high end in it. Yeah, I would suggest keeping your patches, basically, because I didn't do that for this. I didn't keep the patch, hence why I've had to do all this additional processing, because there was just too much high end. So yeah, keep your patches. And then I've got a limiter on there for some reason. I'm not sure why. Oh right, okay, that is why, because all of this processing is literally just on one layer. So if I take that layer out, it's just harmonics essentially that I've added, just to thicken it a bit. I think they're pretty much the same, but one's spread and one isn't. So I've got a stereo version and a mono version of roughly the same thing. Oh, that's the sub bass, I think. Yeah, that's the sub bass, but it's in stereo only. And then, yep, we've got just the harmonics there. And for that, I've literally just used a user like preset sort of thing, just a sine wave, and then drawn in the harmonics myself, because I just wanted the third harmonic and a little. And when you distort stuff, you get all these extra harmonics, as you probably know. So yeah, I just added in some 4th, 5th, and 7th, I think there. But it was random. I didn't go, oh, I need this exact harmonic. It was just like, oh, what sounds good, you know? But I knew I wanted the third, because especially in drum and bass, it's root and third harmonic generally. Okay, there's modulation going on there. I thought it was glitching out. So yeah, together, and that's why I've got the limiter on there, to just smash it down again. And yeah, I just wanted it to sound really gritty and a bit broken. I think that sounds pretty broken. So yeah, and then I've got, again, just a low pass on there. Yeah, so, and I've got more layers that I didn't want to include in there as well, but these are like fluff layers again, they're not like main layers, so it's a low pass Reese, like 2 sawtooths detuned by about a semitone either way, so 25 cents, low pass, simple. You can do it with any synth, as long as it's a subtractive or additive synth. So, this one's muted, and then we got, what's this one? Again, another harmonic layer, just for more harmonics really, just to beef the sound out, because at first what inspired me to make this tune was this one, which is full of harmonics. It's just all harmonics. like, essentially, but it's 20 years old, so there's no way that I could get that sound out of one synth these days, not unless I had really good hardware, essentially, which I don't. So yeah, all these layers, that's what they're for, to get that sort of, I don't know, old sort of sound, a bit muddy as well. Like, I wanted that sort of mud. So yeah, these are literally harmonics. I think this might even be yeah, this is just FM, one oscillator over another. So it's just sine waves, very, very simple. I think like that's the key to my sort of sound anyway. Lots and lots of layers of simplicity. Yeah, because once I start getting a bit overcomplicated, that's when I start like losing where I am and like where I've gone with the sound. I like to know exactly where I am processing wise, so that I can then think about things logically and think what I need to do for the next step or to go back a step or whatever. So yeah, if it's a bit too overcomplicated, it gets confusing. Okay, so there are some additional sounds in here, which I'll play them from here first because they sound better here. So that is an operator again, which is my main synth, really. So as you can hear, that sounds quite different. Mostly just a bit of EQing on there, to be honest. There's not a lot of processing. It's just, yeah, just dipping out loads of the mid-range, really. How did that happen? Anyway, I'll go into the operator patch. Okay, so started off square wave, so I'll add in the individual bits. What that's doing, that's another square, so pretty rare that I use squares. And each one just adding a little bit extra texture. Pardon me. So yeah, it's rare that I use squares. I usually build my sounds out of lots and lots and lots of sine waves, the additive process essentially. But you know, you can do what you like at any given time. So squares this time. Yeah, pretty basic again. I like to keep it simple. Without the filter, it's just a horrid noise. So yeah, lots of resonance, low pass. Yeah, pretty basic. Taken all of the bottom end out. I just yeah, because it's going through the saturators in general are very input dependent. So yeah, it doesn't matter how much you got it driven. It just depends on the dynamic of the sound of your sound source, essentially, how it behaves. So with the low end in there, it's just a sausage to start with, you know. So it's got no dynamic. There'll be no dynamic response. So by taking out the low end, you get more distortion at the crest of the sound, if you will. So that's why I've done that. And then blimey, loads of stuff. Okay, so just the overdrive, dirt essentially, quite a lot of dirt, and then dry chorus, which I rarely use, to be honest, because I'm not the biggest fan of the Ableton chorus. Just because I was a guitarist and I know what a good chorus sounds like. So yeah, but you know, it does a job. And again, parallel EQ. I find that parallel EQ, especially with the Ableton EQ, you can have it go. I've got it at like +6 here. So not only is that double the volume, it's +60. So it's like 6 times louder than what you'd be able to get out of just an EQ by itself, and it never gets brittle. So I find especially when you're boosting high end with EQs, once you get past a certain point, and it varies depending on the sound source, it starts to become really delicate and like sharp at the same time, which is, yeah, it kind of ruins sounds a lot of the time when you boost too much high end. So yeah, doing it in parallel, you do get that, but the sort of the threshold is a lot broader. So you can get away with boosting, say, the equivalent of like 20 dB without actually making it sound delicate or broken or whatever. And without adding too many artifacts as well. So yeah, if you need to boost a lot, parallel is better, in my opinion. So, yeah, and I've done it a lot in this tune especially. And then, yeah, just taking off quite a lot of the, 9K is that? Yeah, struggling to see. Yeah, so just adding in like the sibilant area really, and just chopping out the air, because it's, you don't really want a lot of air like in your bass really, not for this sort of tune anyway. It's not like a nice double bass where you need to hear the strings being plucked or whatever. It's really gritty, and too much high end in a really gritty sound hurts. It does, like, especially when you got it on a big system. It's like fizz, you're like, oh crap. So yeah, I always take out the top end of like super saws as well, like any like chords or anything like that. Always take a 10K, usually up to about 13K, depending on the sound and like what pitches I'm using, and the timbre of the tune, obviously. But yeah, I find that taking away that fizz on the top actually focuses the high end rather than losing any. It actually focuses it. Same with if you low cut as well. Like, that's why in the mastering stage they all low cut at around 25 to 35 hertz, because by doing that it actually focuses the rest of the track. It frees up headroom that you never even knew you had. Right? It's just, yeah. So cutting tops and bottoms might sound counterintuitive, but what you gain more than you lose, basically, in my opinion. And obviously I've had some phase issues there, so I've had to reverse it, or reverse the polarity, just so it fit again. And then, yeah, just some EQ where the snare is, basically. And that's where the snare is as well, but I've obviously wanted to boost that bit. And TP bass lane again, just to mono the bottom. That is an invaluable tool for me, because you could do it with EQ, you know, just a mid-side EQ, but I find that often, like when I A/B between this and a mid-side EQ, there will be a massive loss of information when I compare it to the EQ, basically, whereas this, it forces everything into mono rather than just taking out the sides. So yeah, you don't lose any information, it just gets moved to a different position.
Sorry, what was the name for that plugin?
This one here? TP bass lane. It's it is by Tone Projects, and it's free. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's on Mac. It probably is. Yeah, it's only 32-bit, unfortunately. I've used it with JBridge, so yeah. But to be fair, the bridges are good unless you're using really obscure old plugins which struggle to run anyway. So that's what I found anyway, because I was scared to use a bridge at first, but then discovered that it's only certain plugins that are crap with it, and they're crap anyway.
Yeah, when I was using it on Mac, it was a bit weird sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's another thing for Mac, isn't there? Like, I forget what it's called. Yeah, I forget what it's called, sorry. But it's like 32 lives, that's it, 32 lives or something like that. Yeah, that's one for Mac. And that's really good. I've never had any issues with that. Okay, and then I've got, blimey, there's loads of stuff on here. Okay, this one, I think this is a dynamic EQ, so I haven't got the dynamics on though, so I don't. It's kind of, I probably did, and then just turn them off, and that's just boosting up the sort of the bark of it, and then just the fizz as well. What's left of it anyway, what I haven't removed. And then I think this may be side chained. I don't know. No, it's not. It's literally just holding back the dynamics in the low range. I often do have a multi-band processor on bass in this area, just because I don't really like it to be too dynamic there. Yeah, it becomes a pain, especially in the mastering process when you've got too much in that area, because it tends to overpower a lot of other stuff, and it's very easy to miss on really basic systems, you know, because at my house, like, there's like a 20 dB difference between 130 hertz and 150 hertz. Literally 150 hertz is 20 dB louder, just because of my crappy room. So yeah, I always like to just control that bit, and I find that if there's not enough there in the mastering stage, they can add it, but trying to take it away, it can destroy the punch of your drums, you know, if you're taking it out, if you've got them just right. So yeah, I find it's better to have just a little bit, lacking a little bit rather than having too much, because it can always be added. Okay, yeah, and these summing boxes as well, right? I'm a massive fan of these. They don't have to be the slate ones. I actually use the Waves one quite a lot as well, the non-linear summers, just because it sort of emulates what a desk would do. You know, it adds that sort of random noise that you just cannot get with digital stuff, basically. And it doesn't make a blind bit of difference to the track if it's soloed by itself. It changes the way that the tracks interact with each other, sort of thing. It provides almost like a cushion so that they don't clash together, a cushion of white noise, if you will. But you cannot hear the noise. Like, it's literally like a minus 90 dB or whatever. But you definitely notice when it's not there in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, and the gate after it, because I didn't want the noise to continue afterwards. And yep, my obligatory saturator, just acting as a limiter essentially, as a clipper. And the vintage warmer, which I rarely use now, but this is from 2015. So yeah, that's still on there. I would use Saturn these days for the same thing, but vintage warmer has its sound, so don't discount it just because it's old, you know. It does have its uses still. And then this mental looking EQ here, basically the fundamental of the sound, or maybe I think maybe the third harmonic, I wanted it to be more stereo than mono. I don't know why. I preferred the sound of it that way. So what I've done there is I've cut it from the mono signal and put a resonant filter on the sides so that it sort of amplifies it at the sides, cuts it in the middle. And without that, I don't know if you'll hear the difference on here, but yeah, it's hard for me anyway because I'm right over here. But yeah, on headphones you really tell the difference. And what that does specifically is it separates it from the sort of the droning bass, the sort of rolling bass that's underneath it, because I found that they properly clashed without that, basically. So yeah, that's that. And I've got a gated reverb, which I've used to sort of spread some of the warmth, and because it's got quite a lot of teeth, without the reverb, it sounds really dry and harsh. So, yeah, I often find I need to add reverb to those sorts of sounds, but obviously gating it and just spreading it to the sides just pushes it away from like the main focus and just adds a different texture into it. And again, it's got like chorus and spin on it, so like it adds a bit of movement as well. But yeah, I always gate them because I don't necessarily want the reverb tails. I just want the texture over the sound. So yeah, that's that little bit. And sidechains, which obviously aren't functioning right now because I've just taken this whole group out of another track. So, and the next one is basically the same, but a slightly different configuration on the oscillators. So, what track would that be? It'd be this one. But yeah, just slightly different configuration in the oscillators. So yeah, it's a bit more basic in its processing than the last one. But yeah, I think it is. Okay, so yeah, the difference is in these courses. So that one I've got that configuration, and this one I've got this configuration. It's just trial and error, really. It's not. I didn't set out with a plan of going, this is going to be set like this. I just went, yeah, they sort of go together, and it was kind of a call and response thing. So I wanted like one thing to say one thing, you know. So that is. Oh wait, I've got one more sound that I think's probably worth going into. So that one, which is apparently nothing. Okay. All right, so it's exactly the same as the main bass. It's just processed slightly differently. So this is the just the sine wave, distorted sine wave and harmonics without the white noise. So you can hear what the white noise adds there. But yeah, it's essentially going through very similar processing to the rest of it, like a bit of parallel EQ, this stereo generator thing, which is how I actually got the bass in Dawn, actually, because this saturation has a really unique sort of texture to it. Yeah, I just find it has like a really nice texture to it. It's quite unique, doesn't work on everything. And obviously, spreaders don't generally work on everything either. They've got to have the right content, otherwise you lose all your mono. And I found that it doesn't matter what spreader you use or stereo generator. If the sound isn't supposed to be in stereo, it won't work in stereo. It's yeah, it's a weird one, but one of those things that you get from trial and error. So without that, yeah, okay, it's quite basic. So yeah, without that, it is a bit muddy, you know. Yeah, this just adds that area, essentially, the sort of presence. That area, sort of 1 to 5K, like this sort of area is what we're set up to hear as a species, you know, so that it's really important that is nice in your mix, essentially. But obviously, it's very easy to go overboard with it, so yeah, use with caution, basically. And then trash, which is essentially I'm just distorting with it. Or am I? Not sure what that's doing. Yeah, probably limiting by like 1.5 dB. Didn't need the trash for that, but yeah. And then yeah, just some automated reverb, just so it stops there, you know. So the last beat of the bar is just pure dry bass, basically. Because yeah, I found that when it dropped, if I didn't cut the reverb out before, it was a real anticlimax. You know, it just was like, oh, all the space is gone. So yeah, just cutting out that quarter bar earlier makes all the difference, but you don't really miss it when it's not there. And then yeah, filter, doing what you can hear, you know, so it's just a kind of sausage of noise there. And yeah, I've used this one rather than the Ableton one because it goes way beyond what you can hear, so you don't disrupt any of the noise when it's like not supposed to be disrupting the noise, essentially, which is what I found with the Ableton one. Even if you don't have like anything above like 15K in your sound and it like takes it off at 19K, you can really hear it when it's on there. No, well, I can anyway, and it's not always good. So yeah, sometimes I like to use the FabFilter one. But yeah, I don't think it's any better quality than the auto filter. It's just, it's more transparent, basically. So yeah, again, this is on there. Probably just, yeah, it's taking a lot of the side information and making it mono, like most of it actually. And there's literally just teeth on the sides. Blimey, look at that. Oh, okay, yeah, so I'll do that quite often actually. Like I'll mono everything like up to, yeah, like 5K or something, but have it on a really sort of mellow slope, so 6 dB per octave, and then really boost the sides so you get this like, all the teeth at the sides essentially. It doesn't work with every sound, like I was describing earlier. I had to do the opposite with the main bass. But yeah, I find that especially these sort of end of bar fills, right, they sound better being more mono than stereo. That's just something that I've found through trial and error. Because yeah, so especially if you're listening on like, I don't know, a mono speaker or like even a big rig, like at a festival or whatever, it'll be in mono. And yeah, if those fills aren't really coherent in mono, it really brings down the whole energy, just disappears without those fills, because that's supposed to be like a real spotlight moment, you know. So I found that, yeah, if most of the information is in mono, like you're golden, because you're not going to lose it in mono, you know. And you will listen to it in mono at one point or another without even realising it. But you'll never just listen to the sides. That's just retarded. You know? So yeah, without it, I don't know if you'll hear it in here. I don't know. Oh, it's difficult to hear from my perspective anyway, because I'm over here. But yeah, that is just essentially monoing everything, but then whatever is left spread, it's really like turning it up, 12 dB in fact. So yeah, that's that. And then yeah, taking out that muddy area between 1 and 200 hertz. Because yeah, that's always a problem for me, that area. Like I was saying with my room earlier. I prefer to have not enough in there than a bit too much, especially in the bass. So, yeah, okay, right. So I can probably go up to the additional bits up here now. So on top of this, where am I? Okay, so yeah, I've done some additional processing before I bounced it into this file here. So, yeah, so this is what I would have bounced from this, and then processed it in such a way where, oh no, wrong one. Okay, all the processing is on the bus, obviously. Okay, so I'm taking, wow. Okay, so this is just to focus the dynamics, essentially. So I do this quite often, put expanders or upwards compression, basically, on the mid-range of basses, because I like to have it there at the loud parts, because it makes it sound full, you know, but I don't want it there when just the sub bass and the fizz is supposed to happen. So yeah, I expand it to expand the dynamic range in that area, because I find that your sub area under 100 hertz and above 1K sound really great, being utterly dynamicless, you know, just massive. But that bit between like 100 hertz and 1K, that's where I like to have all of my dynamics, and that's where all the warmth comes from, the dynamics in that area. That's what I found anyway. So yeah, that's why I do that, and I just have it reacting to the input signal. So yeah, these two are expanding. That one's compressing because, like I've explained already, that's a problem area for a lot of sounds. And then this processing here, I've only done because of this reference here. So before, without like this EQ on there, yeah, I thought it would be okay for me to sacrifice some sub bass for some perceived volume in the low end. So I cut out like the well, I didn't cut out, but I dipped it by like 3 dB or something like that, and then boosted 80 hertz. So the second harmonic essentially. So yeah, so before this was way too loud, to be honest. So it's good to have. This is why it's good to have a reference, basically, because it might sound cool and you're like, oh yeah, that bass is fat, but then you reference it to something else, and you're just like, oh wow, that's like, sounds like it's coming from an anus, you know. So yeah, it's good to have a reference, basically. And yeah, sometimes the counterintuitive thing is sometimes when you think, oh yeah, that bass is so hench, like really, it's got nothing to do with the amount of sub bass. It's all harmonics, and you know. That reference is a perfect example. It's like from 20 years ago, so like they didn't have the analyzers and like anything like that. So they probably didn't have very big speakers either, because it was drum and bass and it was a very small genre back then, you know. So probably just did it on hi-fi speakers or whatever. So the harmonic was what they would hear essentially. So that's what they brought out, that sort of 80 hertz range. And even if you hear it on a big system, like you notice the difference between like tunes from then and tunes from now, because like tunes from now, it's all sub bass, like nice clean band of harmonics, but back then it was just like crazy distortion and like no sub bass really to speak of. It's just all harmonics, and that arguably sounds fatter. I don't know, and it takes up less headroom as well. All right, well, okay, so, and then, wow, okay, so this is literally doing nothing, these 3 bands. And this is a bit of upwards compression just to bring out that sort of bark again. Upwards expansion. So without that, it's very toppy. That way, it brings a bit of dynamic to the top, but not so much that it dives out at you. It just comes out in the right places and then falls back. Because yeah, especially later on in the tune, I think it's like this section here. There's the rides that come in, and like it was really clashing with the rides, and I had to turn the rides up way more than they should have, like louder than they should have been. And yeah, it's sometimes it's very difficult to know. Oh, I need to take out the top end, because like you want that top end, you know, and it's like I begrudgingly take things out because it's like, oh, it sounds good with it there or whatever, but it doesn't matter how it sounds on its own. It really doesn't. It's how it interacts with the rest of the tune, and maybe losing a bit here and there it makes it sound better. Like even though you've lost a bit, like it sounds more comfortable to listen to. So yeah, I think that's the sort of goal. It doesn't matter how dirty the tune is, it needs to be easy to listen to. Otherwise people will just wince away from it, and you know, that's not what you want, especially on a big rig, you know, because you'll hurt people. So going into these layers on the sort of peripherals. So for these sounds here, I've basically just duplicated tracks, and so yeah, they're the originals, just with little bit of delay. Reverb on this one is literally just a band of reverb. So that sort of underwater sort of thing, which it gives it a tail, but it doesn't interrupt anything else. It just sits there in the background and just behaves itself. And yeah, a bit of phaser to like give it a bit of wobble, because yeah, I think I wanted the spring reverb sort of sound on this. And yeah, just a bit of EQ because there's a real like honky frequency in there. So yeah, that's pretty basic. Just a bit of balancing, you know. Okay, this one, I think it's actually a delay on there. Couple of choruses. So yeah, for this one, I decided to do left-right choruses, like that, and I don't know why, I never do this, but for some reason it sounded better doing it this way on this. So it's always worth experimenting with these types of things. Whether we want to put one chorus on there, or like one for left, one for right. Same with any effect really, because sometimes you get a much more spacious effect, like doing that. I suppose it's the difference between if you got like any of the new Waves plugins, you can get like stereo mid-side and left-right, or duo or whatever. And like if you've got a stereo track, duo really makes it sound a lot cleaner in the stereo spread. I'm not sure why, but yeah, it's just the way it is. But yeah, again, it's worth experimenting with that. And yeah, just delay and reverb to sort of emulate a spring, you know. And often after that, I would put a filter and just to clean up the top end and modulate that 16ths. So and I'd only really do that though if there's quite a lot of top end already. Yeah, it just gets you a sort of a more bouncy effect really. And yeah, I'll do that like 90% of the time when I'm doing that sort of delay reverb kind of combo. So yeah, that's those two. And then, like I said, I've duplicated them here and done reverse delay and reverb, and then reversed them again. So clearly chopped that up as well, but you don't have to. Yeah, I'm a big fan of reverse delays and reverbs, especially a combo of the two, because you get, yeah, it's a sound that you just can't achieve without doing it backwards, essentially. Like you can get reverbs that do reverse reverbs, but it's not really a reverse reverb. It's backwards after the fact that it's happened. So it's a different kettle of fish, really. So yeah, I still like doing it the old way and just freezing it out. And then I've got some Foley layers on that. This is like the only Foley I actually have in this tune. There's some Foley on the snare, but it's buried. Like you can sort of hear it a little bit, like the squelchy, clappy sort of thing. But that's pretty standard. Here I've got a stool being scraped across a floor, you know, and when I'm layering up Foley like this, I will 99% of the time whack it through a Doppler. Just because it moves it in the stereo like field, and it moves it in pitch as well. So it's not just like a stationary sort of, oh, that's the wrong word, stationary pan. Like, it doesn't make sense, paradox. But yeah, it's not just a, it's not just moving left, right, it's also moving backwards, forwards, up, down sort of thing. With pitch makes things move up and down, like from the speakers. And yeah, I just wanted that sort of 3D effect.
How does it affect the Doppler when it goes into mono? So, like the whole Doppler effect in mono?
Oh, yeah, it still makes a difference, because like when you pan stuff, especially in stereo, you will gain 3 dB like for hard left and hard right compared to mono. So you will get level differences anyway, even if you do compress it into mono. And those level differences will turn into like extra modulation when in,
So it works out when
Yeah. When it's coupled with the pitch of the Doppler, you still get that warbling effect, but it's not spread, obviously. But yeah, it still does make a big difference, especially when it's blended with like the original signal or whatever. But in this case, I'm blending it with a different signal. But yeah, it's literally just a chair being scraped across the floor with a Doppler on it and some distortion. I think actually there's like a tail from like a lion as well, like delay tail. If you can hear that, like because I often do that as well. I will splice the effects tail from one sound with a completely different sound, so that you just get this like I don't know, false continuation. Like it's like, I don't know, a trickery type that you like, yeah, kind of, and a little bit less muddy as well, because like I find that tails can sometimes muddy up things, and like if it's a different tail, it's like a whole different sound.
So sort of like you've actually thought it through, it gives it the extra shine afterwards.
Yeah. To be fair though, I'm not sure I actually thought that through. It's probably a happy accident, which is like it's the case for a lot of things, to be honest. Especially in sound design, it's rare that people will be like, I made that on purpose. But obviously, that's why I like to keep things simple, because like you know exactly what's happening, and once it gets more convoluted and everything, it's like it was an accident, So yeah, I like to do most things on purpose, but happy accidents are great, So yeah, I've got a few variations of that going on. A faster one, just different speeds. I think they're all the same, but if I drag this out, it's probably, there's loads of them now. So I've done lots of variations, just going through the Doppler at different speeds and stuff, and like different levels of distortion, so. Yeah, and you can hear like the line coming out a little bit more there. Yeah, I don't know what that dip was all about. Probably had it side chained or something at some point. But yeah, this is what I'll do, just like bounce a whole bunch of them and like just pick the best ones, really. Whatever fits over the sound, really. But yeah, that's essentially, that's all the Foley I've really used for the bass in this one, and it's really subtle. I mean, yeah, it's the sort of thing where you can't really hear it in the tune, but if you mute it, it's like, okay, something's missing now. I'm not sure how effective it'll be on these monitors, but we'll see. Yeah, it's the sort of thing, it's very, very subtle, very in the background. But again, especially with my headphones on, when I mute it, I'm like, whoa, all the body's gone from the sides now. So it definitely helps, but sometimes, especially in a tune like this, I want it to be very roller focused. So, it's just peripherals, really, just something to add a little bit of texture, but not be distracting in any way, So, yeah. And sometimes I'll be reluctant to turn things down like that, because I've spent all this time doing all the sound design just to bury it, It seems kind of pointless in a way, but like I said, you miss it when it's gone, especially on certain systems if you're used to hearing it and stuff. So yeah, it's one of those things that it takes, I don't know, dedication to just not include it as a primary thing. But yeah, what else have we got here? This is muted. I wonder what it is anyway. Some reverb, probably. Oh no, okay, just that area, which no wonder it's muted. That's horrible. And then we have... That is literally just this bass pitched up by to the third harmonic, essentially, an octave and a fifth. And you can hear it with, and then I'll mute it, and it's like, it's very thin. Adds that extra sort of weirdness on top. It's not even like it adds thickness or anything like that. It just, in my eyes, it literally adds weirdness. Like, there's no other like adjective I can use to describe it. It's just weird. So yeah, I often do that as well. And if a sound is like, oh, how can I bring something out of this sound without over-processing it or whatever, like that is what I'll do. I'll duplicate it and then pitch it up to the third harmonic and take out the fundamental. So, you know, just EQ it as needed or whatever. And in this instance, I've whacked it straight in the background, like just all room, basically. Without that. It just buries it into the background, basically. So, with that, I would go through these synths, but these are just stand-ins. Literally, it's a square wave, and I hate it. So I'm definitely not going to leave that in there. The little pad chord things, I don't even know what chord that would be. It's just, you know, random. But yeah, kind of works for this anyway. Where is the, there we go. I don't know, old Virus sort of sound, you know, Ed Rush and Optical, that sort of vibe. Lots of flange, lots of chorus, just dissonance, and you know. And I've bit crushed it down to 12-bit because I wanted it to sound like that old, early digital sort of Akai sort of period. So that's what they would do. But yeah, it's got a lot of processing on it. I've tried to make it acceptable, but it's just bogus, basically. It's just a square wave. Yeah, with a bit of pitch mod on it, so that it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And like the main sort of vibe of the sound is actually the trash, so it's that sort of roomy sort of echo, which is quite mad because I never really use it for the convolutional delay or anything like that, but this time it worked nicely. And I've got a resonant filter on the sides because, again, like the peripheral basses, I didn't want them to clash with the main sort of rolling bass. So I took the fundamental sort of frequencies and sort of pushed them down a little bit in mono, but then on the sides I boosted them up to compensate. So like, yeah, they're mostly around the sides. When you have it in mono, like the whole tune in mono, you can still hear the lead and the notes, but it's not thick, you know, and that all comes from the sides. So yeah, it's very drums and bass orientated in the mono, basically. And I've got, what else have we got here? Okay, so I think, yeah, this is all made out of Foley. So, yeah, it's literally, I can't remember what that is. Let me see if there's any more so we can... You know, so you can get that sound quite easily by going, you know, it's just, it's quite a generic sort of sound, really. And then we've got... And yeah, that is like an air horn that's been stretched out and modulated to D sharp, so 37 something, maybe 38 hertz, I can't remember. But yeah, on a square wave, so you're getting that sort of like glitchy, like sort of sound. In hindsight, I probably would have made that a little less of that effect, but you know, it's been printed in now, so I've got no choice. I'm gonna have to work with it. So down to the group which I've called effects, which aren't effects at all. They're just stuff that I didn't want in any other folder. So I just, yeah, had to name the folder, you know. So this is literally a speak and spell. Yeah, like I think you can, there's actually a VST for it now, like speak and spell VST, you just type in what you want and it says it in that voice, which is, it's got a unique texture, so like it won't work all the time. Like, but you know, when it does work, it works. So it's worth a try. Again, it's lots of Foley, basically. You know, actually, I remember exactly what that is. It's a bit of plumbing tube, which I blew a raspberry down and it went like that, and yeah, just pitched it up and down with a big old reverb on it, lots of delay. So yeah, the dry version is hilarious. It sounds like a baby goat or something, but yeah, it's yeah, with the right reverb on it. I think I used like a convolution speakerphone. And used like an arena sort of like impulse response for that. So yeah, that's that, and yeah, just played it at different pitches essentially. Kind of sounds like a guitar at some points. Like it's really weird how you can get stuff to sound like instruments, even though you found it in a bin. You know, it's. But yeah, that's that. And then yeah, I'm a big fan of buses, basically, and compressing on a bus. So on this one, I've got a limiter first, which I've got into the habit of doing that, actually, putting a limiter before a compressor, because I found that if you've got a lot of peaks that, say, have, I don't know, a dynamic range of like 6 dB, so the quietest peak is like 6 dB louder, quieter than the loudest one, the compressor will like really struggle to keep up with that, and it will make it louder and quieter, you know, and you'll notice it being louder and quieter. But if you put a limiter before the compressor, it evens out those peaks a little bit. Yeah, before the compressor, so it evens out the peaks a little bit. You don't need to smash it through there either. So that isn't even really engaged, because I think before, a lot of this stuff was... Okay, so yeah, I've put these on the individual tracks, and just because this one was like minus 2 dB or something like that, and that was really hitting the limiter before. So yeah, that's a bit unnecessary now, but I do that on most buses. So yeah, it will just even out the peaks so that the compressor behaves in a predictable manner for each peak, basically. And it's a technique that my mastering engineer taught me, actually. Because I've always been like, how the hell do you use a compressor like that and it sounds so clean, you know, so precise and predictable? And he's like, yeah, you put a limiter before, and not smashing it, just taking off enough of the top peaks so that you reduce the dynamic range of the transients to 1 or 2 dB. And generally, you only need to take off about 1 or 2 dB if you've mixed it properly. And yeah, that's where I like to get to on most limiters. Even the master limiter, I'll look to only limit by about, take off about 2 dB gain reduction, 4 dB tops, because anything after that, I think it starts to sound really shit, basically. So having your main sound, like a lot of people will be like, oh, it needs more low end, so they'll actually boost low end on that sound, maybe ruining the vibe of it a little bit, whereas I would just add a layer of just what it needs, you know, just the harmonics it needs, just out of sine waves. And it can become a bit large doing it that way, you know, like CPU-wise and track-wise. But I mean, as long as like you save your tracks, so this is on version 10 and I'm nowhere near finished, you know, so yeah, it does take up a lot of space, but at least you can go back into it and be like, oh, it needs more of that exact thing, and then just go, whoop, done. You know, you don't affect the rest of the sound at all. Like, yeah, not like an EQ would or like a distortion or whatever on the sound itself. So yeah, having your main layer, your main sound, and then just having peripheral bits and pieces, which on their own, they don't really, they sound like nothing, but in with that main sound, it's just, oh, that makes sense. So yeah, it's, yeah, that's my modus operandum really. Simple, many simple layers, just appropriate layers, I suppose. Nothing too over the top, because like you've got your main sound, you don't need to add too much to that. Just some extra little bits here and there. So yeah, that's it really for this tune.
Nice place to round it up. So thanks.
Okay, so that was my guest lecture at DBS Music Bristol, going through my untitled track. Hope you enjoyed it.